Welcome to the Quill and Sword Episode 1. Today, I'm going to introduce you to CLAMO, that's the Center for Law and Military Operations. I'm your host, Captain Joel Hood, Marine Corps representative at CLAMO. With me today in the Nolan Reading Room at the Judge Advocate General's Legal Center and School is the entire CLAMO team. Our director, Lieutenant Colonel Jason Elbert, U.S. Army. Deputy Director, Major Austin Reibelin, U.S. Army. Dr. Jan Ganschau, German Armed Forces Legal Service Exchange Officer. Lieutenant Colonel Grzegorz Januszewski, Polish Army Exchange Officer. Lieutenant Commander Tyler Stutton, Coast Guard Representative. Lieutenant Commander Brigham Fugel, Navy Representative. Major Elijah Beaver, National Guard Bureau. That's the whole crew. We're just missing our new NCO who's out sick today, but we're going to cover his portfolio, right, sir?
Absolutely right. Sergeant First Class Trey Engel, the first CLAMO NCO I see in over 10 years.
It's fantastic. We're very excited to have him on board. Today, we're going to loop you in on what CLAMO does, where to find our products, and how to get in touch. You can't go wrong by starting at our website, https://tjaglix.army.mil/center/CLAMO. Lieutenant Colonel Elbert, sir, let's start with you. What's CLAMO's mission and who does it serve?
CLAMO's mission is to support legal advisors to military operations by training and educating, collecting and sharing lessons learned, publishing legal resources, and facilitating multinational legal interoperability. We do this through our vision. In our vision, we strive to be the most responsive resource provider for the operational legal professionals in both the classified and unclassified environments, disseminating current best practices and timely lessons learned provided by the operational force, and serving as expert analysts of emerging legal issues.
Now, you've spoken about the resources that we provide. Where will judge advocates find those resources on our website?
So, Joel, the website is a gateway for accessing our publications and products. But let me pause and emphasize that all our efforts fall under 4 lines. First, education and training. Second, publication. Third, collection, analysis, dissemination. And fourth, multinational legal interoperability. Part of that line of effort, we're so fortunate to have 2 exchange officers within our team, a German exchange officer and a Polish exchange officer, who you'll hear from in a little bit. But you asked what's on our website? Well, for example, Lieutenant Commander Emily Militello, a former Coast Guard member of CLAMO, spent, hundreds of hours drafting an Operation Allies Welcome AAR, which is essentially a book with about 60 pages that you can read through, and then templates for the mission requirements during OAW. That's on the website. Lieutenant Colonel Andy Farquhar, who is a former UK officer within CLAMO and the Legal Center, created a multinational legal interoperability handbook, which is on the website. Major Valeria Brooks, a former National Guard liaison at CLAMO, updated the Domestic Operations Handbook and made it better than ever. That's on the website. In another example, maybe the best because it's a periodic publication that comes out through CLAMO, the National Security Law Quarterly. And Joel, that's your project. You're the editor-in-chief. Why don't you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's right, sir. That's kind of my pet project. We work really hard on this quarterly publication. It's structured kind of like a law review, but the articles are all practical and written by attorneys in the field and at the combat training centers. They're after-action reports with critical takeaways and loaded with reference material. I envision it being the primary tool by which young operational law attorneys, judge advocates, and any of the armed services can get smart on some of the most critical legal issues in the profession of arms. So members of CLAMO are really prolific in information gathering and in writing to help us prepare for the next fight. We're trying to capture some of those things in the National Security Law Quarterly, or NSLQ. And I'd like to focus our attention now on Lieutenant Commander Stutton and Lieutenant Commander Fugel, because they were recently out in Eastern Europe. Gentlemen, can you talk about your recent efforts out there to gather lessons learned?
Absolutely. We're really trying to get ahead of the curve so that when the next conflict comes, we're not fighting the last war.
Exactly. And that's a struggle that's playing out from the tactical level all the way up to EUCOM. Soldiers with global war on terrorism, counterinsurgency experience are confronting a new reality in Eastern Europe. And everything from authorities to contracts to operations themselves look different.
Yep, our travels across Poland and Germany got us up close and personal with the large-scope U.S. effort that is being reorganized under Security Assistance Group Ukraine. This is causing some initial confusion with respect to command relationships at the tactical level, but it should eventually streamline U.S. Army support to the conflict.
Yeah, we've got a really interesting view, and we're in the process now of putting it all together. 2 countries, 10 days, 6 different stops, and 34 interviews. We have a lot of material.
Well, that's really interesting. Gentlemen, that's a key effort, I think, that the rest of the armed forces are really going to rely on, especially our legal personnel. When will the judge advocate communities have access to your full after-action report?
It will be in the March issue of the National Security Law Quarterly. Please reach out to us with any questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I'd like to turn now, as we're talking about Eastern Europe, we're talking about multinational legal interoperability, to our exchange officers. Dr. Jan Ganschow, a German exchange officer. You, sir, are a prolific writer. You've contributed so much to CLAMO's multinational legal interoperability efforts. What are you currently working on?
Thank you, Joel. I do what I can. I truly feel that legal interoperability is critical to winning as a coalition and to preserve the rules-based order. So during the last year, I particularly focused on legal aspects of large-scale combat operations in the land domain and in the maritime domain, but also on deterrence operations and their respective legal interoperability challenges. So the lessons learned from my observation were published in the National Security Law Quarterly issues this year, or rather last year now, since we are early 2023. With my reporting, I attempt to foster a deeper knowledge of United States allies and partners within our legal communities. So in a coalition scenario, this knowledge and enhanced legal interoperability could prove decisive to the outcome of military operations. For the coming year, I will continue with this effort, but have inter alia the honor to be tasked with coordinating CLAMO's work on a legal fact book for NATO's eastern flank, so that judge advocates and legal advisor get an even better understanding of the respective legal battlefield. And together with Major Reibelin, I will conduct an elective for the 71st graduate course on NATO.
We're looking forward to that graduate course very much. Now, sir, you've recently had some help regarding multinational legal interoperability here at CLAMO, right?
Oh yes. In fact, Lieutenant Colonel Grzegorz Janiszewski from Poland recently arrived and is focused on issues with Poland and Ukraine. So, Grzegorz, would you like to comment on your work and how you see CLAMO supporting Polish efforts for interoperability?
Yes, thank you, Jan. Yes, it is very important, as Polish Ministry of Defense has described recently, interoperability between Polish armed forces and the U.S. Army is gonna be one of the most important issues. So, but also in the legal branch, but I have to say frankly that it's completely new issue for Polish legal branch. So this is starts, and I think that CLAMO is absolutely the most appropriate institution and the most appropriate address to start it and to develop such cooperation and interoperability. So we have exchange officers. We have exchange officers in Warsaw from 1.5 years. Now we have exchange officer in CLAMO. So we are planning some common exercises with participation of Polish and US legal advisors, common trainings, some documents like interoperability handbook. Also, I'm working on NATO Eastern Flank fact book, some cooperation with Ukrainian side. I think it allows us to develop the interoperability and cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Please reach out to Dr. Ganschow and Lieutenant Colonel Janiszewski if you're deploying and have additional questions about the Eastern Flank. Now I'd like to turn my attention to Major Beaver, sir. You're new here at CLAMO within the past few months and have a great portfolio. Now, what do National Guard judge advocates need to know about your work and what you do?
Well, CLAMO is a dynamic organization, and we touch so many different national security issues. For instance, Lieutenant Commander Stutton and I are working to put together the DOMOPS conference 23 through 27 January, and we would love to have you there. We are pleased to be holding it in person this year. Last year was online due to COVID restrictions. I recently attended a regional conference in South Carolina with several states' National Guard judge advocates where we discussed the current DOMOPS issues with National Guard senior leaders. I've also assisted Major Reiblin and my predecessor, Major Brooks, working on the upcoming Pandemic and Disaster Relief Handbook. That has been a really heavy lift, and all of CLAMO collaborated to put it together. Major Brooks gathered a ton of information from commands across the U.S. to preserve lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. It'll be available soon, but I'm hoping that it won't be needed soon. Domestic operations is fascinating. It has a ton of legal complexities, and they occur by definition in the midst of the American population. I'm looking forward to engaging with our leaders to make sure we're upholding our responsibilities to our citizens without overstepping our bounds in regards to civilian governance.
Well, thank you, sir. It's great to have you on board. Now, we've covered most of CLAMO's lines of effort, but I'd like to start landing the plane by talking about education and training. Major Reiblin, sir, how is CLAMO tied into the combat training centers?
Thanks, Joel. CLAMO maintains an oversight role over judge advocates at the Army Combat Training Centers, which includes the Joint Readiness Training Center, the National Training Center, and the Joint Multinational Readiness Center. We also have a strong connection to judge advocates at the Mission Command Training Program and NATO's Joint Warfare Center. These relationships serve as a feedback loop, allowing CLAMO to capture lessons learned during training rotations that we can disseminate to the field. Additionally, CLAMO provides lessons learned from the field to our observer coach trainers to improve training for target audiences. As mentioned earlier, I'd also like to take the time to recognize Sergeant First Class Trey Engel. We're excited to have him aboard as the first paralegal in nearly a decade. Sergeant Engel is going to be focused on paralegal engagement and enhancing paralegal involvement during combat training center rotations and, more broadly, in the national security law field. Sergeant Engel is going to be a great asset to CLAMO and national security law practitioners in the field. We're excited to have him here.
Yeah, we're definitely excited to have him here. Thank you, sir. Now, that leaves me to describe what I can do for you. I have the targeting and collateral damage estimation portfolio for CLAMO. I train judge advocates on their role in those processes and can help you get to targeting or CDE qualification courses, as well as give training in person or virtually. I'm the editor-in-chief of the National Security Law Quarterly, like Lieutenant Colonel Elbert mentioned, and I really think of it as a must-read. We have to capture your lessons learned from the field and preserve critical institutional memory. Please consider submitting articles and AARs in the 1,500 to 2,500 word range. I also manage this podcast and Fred Talks and encourage you to listen to both of those. With that, Colonel Elbert, members of CLAMO, I think it's time to end this first podcast of the Quill and Sword. Any saved rounds?
Yes. Joel, thanks for your huge efforts in putting the Quill and Sword together. We are really excited to have this podcast series come to life, which will capture operational lessons learned and lessons learned from across the core competencies and allow us a chance to just talk about current legal issues. It's really exciting that this is getting off the ground and look forward to what's in store. Hopefully some conversations with the combat training centers and some conversations about really critical legal issues that we all care about and judge advocates can learn from.
Thank you, sir. Well, that's all we have for now. Catch CLAMO on the Quill and Sword again the first Friday of each month as we start delving into NSL topics with contributing authors of the NSLQ and CTC Observer Coach trainers.